Mars has always been red, red with dust, rust, and the blood of people who dreamed too high. But that night, it wasn't just the color of the planet that weighed heavily. It was the sound. The wind blew between Cydonia's cracked domes, carrying fine grains of sand that slammed against the metal panels like impatient fingers on a door. The entire colony was in forced silence, not of peace, but of waiting. Everyone knew something was going to explode. The Martians, descendants of generations that were born in red dust, said that Earth treated them as servants, working in mines, digging tunnels, and producing water in factories that consumed more lives than energy. Each day, a body returned to the surface inside a transparent bag, frozen by the lack of pressure or burned by the plasma accident. And each body was shipped with a cold report to Earth. Normal occurrence of work. Normal. That word burned. The revolt started small. Tools left on the ground, abandoned shifts, signs scratched with short phrases. We are not a colony, we are home. Then came the power boycotts, the generators turned off on purpose, and the cables hidden. When Earth soldiers were sent to restore order, they found steady faces, calloused hands, and makeshift weapons. The red of the mines became a barricade. The silence of Mars turned into a scream. That night, the first in which crossfire lit up the Martian horizon, something else happened. Between the transmissions of orders, calls for help, and combat interference, a voice emerged that was neither from Mars nor from Earth. Short, scratchy, but clear enough to chill the spine of the technicians who heard it. Fight. Divide yourselves. Bleed. The planet will be ours when you destroy yourselves. Few believed it at first. They said it was propaganda, a psychological trick. But the engineers knew the frequency came from outside, from high orbit, masked as a human signal. Someone was blowing gasoline into the fire. In New Cydonia, a 12-year-old girl recorded the broadcast on a school recorder. He showed his father, who was fighting against ground troops. The man took the recording to the rebel council. Some laughed. Others were silent, more tense than before. At the ground barracks on Elysium, generals were also given snippets of the same voice. They called it Martian infiltration. They accused the rebels of fabricating evidence to divert attention. But military technicians saw the difference. It was not a Martian echo. It was not a terrestrial echo. It was something beyond. Meanwhile, the shooting continued. Colonists blew up shipments from Earth. Troops set fire to mining tunnels. Children hid in shelters that smelled of iron and fear. Mars seemed doomed to repeat the story that Earth has always known. Blood against blood of the same species. But deep in the dust, there were those who listened to the whisper carefully. There were those who realized that the rebellion, although legitimate, had gained a push from outside. And that maybe, at that very moment, Mars wasn't just Mars. It was the scene of a bigger trap. On Earth, news broadcasts showed images of the red explosions and shouted, "Martian betrayal." On Mars, pamphlets circulated with the words, "Free yourselves from earthly tyranny." No one realized that they were both reading the same script, written by invisible hands. And while colonies burned, the voice returned. Clearer, bolder, as if she was sure that no one suspected her. Humans, kill yourselves, divide yourselves. When the last of you falls, the planet will be ours. The whisper of Mars did not come from Martians, nor Earthlings. It came from those who always wanted both. And that night, in the midst of the crossfire, Mars called out to Earth. Not with a cry for help, but with the cry of his own ruin. It was the beginning of the longest night of the human species. Cydonia woke up in a stronger red than usual. It wasn't the sun rising, it was fire. The corridor leading to the mines trembled with explosions. The domes creaked. The air inside the tunnels tasted like metal. Mira, a foreman who had become a leader unintentionally, crossed the gate with the half-crooked mask and the rifle that a neighbor had assembled with drill parts. Behind her, ordinary people, a welder, a cook, and a nurse. Nobody wanted war, but everyone was in it. No heroism, Mira said. Short shots. Cover. Routes B and C are ready. If it falls, it gets up. If it doesn't work, it retreats. On the other side of the sector, the Earth troop advanced in clean formation. Blue lights cut through the dust. Lieutenant Raoul, his face marked with fatigue, gave orders in a dry voice. Without harming civilians, push, not crush. We need the water, the pumps, and the people. Without a colony, there is no Mars. The two sides saw each other for the first time, a few meters away, separated by a narrow street of dust. Mira raised her hand, asking for a speech. Raoul also raised his, asking for calm. In that second, the wind hit the metal and brought a strange noise over the radio. A whisper, short, cold, divide. The first shot was not from Mira or Raoul. It started from a high corner, where no one should have been. The shot pierced the ground near a boy's foot. Panic exploded. Mira pulled us behind the generator. Raoul ordered smoke. The corridor turned into chaos. Martian dust fattened the air. Mira advanced down the flank, using the shadows of the solar panels. Raoul moved the shield forward, protecting the team from the medbot. Nobody wanted to kill. Everyone wanted to live. But the city was already breaking down. In the middle of the shooting, the girl on the tape recorder, Lila, appeared in a doorway with her eyes wide open. Her father, a member of the rebel council, forcibly pulled her back. "It's not a child's place, Lila. Dad." The voice. She came back. "They're picking fights," he whispered. The tape recorder clutched to his chest. From above, drones, small, black, unmarked from Earth, began to flash white light like fireflies of ice. Where had they come from? They were not from the garrison. They were not from the settlers. When they came down, the radio sizzled with the same sentence, now clearer. "Fight. Kill yourselves. The planet will be ours." Mira saw one of these drones land on a beam and discharge a pulse that jammed two rifles, one on each side. He looked at Raoul in the middle of the smoke. He also looked at her. For a second, they both understood the same thing. There are fingers out in this fight. The ensuing explosion broke an oxygen pipeline. The pressure alarm beeped shrilly. The ceiling of the gallery vibrated. If that line broke, the entire sector would be out of breath. "Oxygen!" Raoul shouted, running with two soldiers. "Close the main valve!" "Routes B and C!" Mira shouted. "Children first!" Elderly people together. No one stays. Settlers and troops rushed in the same direction, bumping, pushing, and saving people. The war stopped for 30 seconds for life to pass. Someone fell. Two arms, one with an earth glove, the other with a miner's glove, lifted him up at the same time. The alarm stopped. The pipeline closed. The air blew weak again, but it came back. On Mira's radio, a voice suddenly came in, too clean to be human. "Break the North Dome. They will blame the Earth." On Raoul's radio, another, the same. "Attack the water station. Blame the rebels." He hung up on the spot. Mira too. But many did not hear in time. In another wing, a more excited group ran towards the central station. In parallel, a more nervous squadron from Earth advanced to the northern dome. The invisible plan worked. Spread, isolate, set fire. Lila, small in the middle of boots and dust, escaped her father and ran to Mira, extending the tape recorder. "Auntie, listen. They are not from here." Mira listened. It was the same voice that made her bite her own fear. He took the radio, switched to open band, and shouted without poetry, "Attention, Cydonia. There are things from outside blowing war. If you hear a strange order, check. 2 equal signs. 4, 3 equal signs. Retreats." Raoul heard the warning. Without hesitation, he repeated through the garrison canal, "Confirm origin before acting. Without confirmation, lock the trigger. Whoever shoots without checking gets out of line." For the first time, a bit of reason entered the hurricane. The battle continued but changed its tone. The shots got shorter. The races are more thought out. When unmarked drones descended, both sides pointed at them first. Some were shot down, others escaped. At the edge of the North Dome, the ground group nearly set off a demolition charge. A different whisper blew into the sergeant's ear. Come in. Opens. Fast. He hesitated. He remembered Raoul's instruction. He checked the code. It didn't match. He put away the cargo. Returned. He saved the dome. At the water station, the most excited were already preparing improvised explosives. Mira arrived with half a dozen, with no weapons drawn. "If you break this, we'll die together," he said simply. "They crush us," one shouted. "They drink this water too." She pointed to the earth badge on a pipe, worn out by years. "And babies too." The screams lowered a tone. The dust settled a little. The city breathed. That's when the brown sky on Mars lit up pale green. A ship that was neither from Earth nor Cydonia cut the firmament low, in silence. The shadow passed over the domes like an icy hand, and behind her, another, thin and curved, with lights that changed like snakeskin. Everyone's voice on the radio was clear, without noise. "Keep going. The planet will be ours." Raoul looked up, his hand closed in his helmet. "They are not ours." Mira pulled Lila closer, her heart pounding in her neck. "Neither ours nor theirs." The black drones stopped pretending. They got down and fired at civilians and soldiers at the same time. The mask has fallen. The whole city saw it. The reaction was quick, almost instinctive. Rebels and troops turned their shoulders together and fired at the drones. A miner threw a network of cables over 3 at once. An Earth soldier anchored a shield to the ground and made room for the children to pass behind. The old man from the bar threw bottles full of cold gasoline that, when they touched the carcass, stopped the engines. Lila, on her knees, recorded and transmitted, crying and firm. "This is Cydonia. There are people from outside. I repeat, there are people from outside shooting at us. Earth, listen. Mars, listen." The pale craft fired a beam that streaked the sand in a straight line and silenced 3 radios at once. Another line, another silence. Raoul called for the evacuation of Sector A. Mira pulled routes through tunnels B and C. The city became an anthill, not for escape, but for relocation. Within minutes, everyone knew where to run. When the dust settled for the umpteenth time, one of the drones fell at Raoul's feet. He kicked the carcass, opened it with the blade of the field kit, and saw circuits that he did not recognize. No Earth standard, no Cydonia brand. Pure, cold lines of a hand that was not from there. "Are you recording?" he asked the girl. "I am, young man." "So record this. Mars calls Earth. We have an enemy who doesn't speak our language. The fight you saw on the news is half true, half theater. We need to stop falling into their trap." Mira brought her face closer to the camera, dirty with dust and sweaty. "Cydonia won't turn herself in, but it will not kill by mistake either. If you are on Earth and you hear me, send less ordering and more listening. If you are on Mars and you hear me, do not destroy what keeps you alive." If a voice comes without a name and without a face, it hangs up, and he asks again. Lila's father, who had finally found his daughter, held her shoulder tightly, and for the first time in his life, looked respectfully at the emblem of the Earth on Raoul's arm. Raoul, for the first time in weeks, saw in Mira's eyes something other than anger. Evaluation, possible agreement. "Corridor truce?" he ventured. "Hallway truce," she replied. "As long as these things are in the sky, the aim is on them. Then we fight again, if necessary." A new beam streaked the horizon and hit an antenna. The crack echoed through the city. Puddles of water began to boil in the broken pipelines. The air has become thinner. "We need pressure pumps," Raoul said. "We have 2 working," Mira said. "Do you have sealants?" "We do." "Then come." They went together. The red night continued, long. There were losses. There were injuries. There was fear. But there was also a new thread holding it all together. The simple idea that someone was using both sides as rope, and that if they cut off that hand, maybe there would still be a planet to discuss. Before dawn, Lila climbed on top of a container, lifted the tape recorder, and sent it to all open frequencies. "This is Mars. Earth, do you hear me? Don't fall. We will not fall. If it comes, come to add, not to rule. There are big things in the sky. The night is calling you." The message went through the dust, crossed space in stubborn waves, and arrived on Earth as bad and necessary news arrives. No invitation, no license, no apologizing. And so began the night Mars called Earth, not with an anthem, but with a raspy recording of a 12-year-old girl, a mine leader with dirty hands, and a weary lieutenant who decided not to pull the wrong trigger. The next answer would come from the blue, and with it, the proof of what the invisible voice feared most. Humans who learn in the midst of the storm. The message pierced the void like a spark. When she arrived on Earth, she was not received with celebration. She was received with fear. News reports showed Lila's voice repeated in entire homes. "This is Mars. Earth, do you hear me? Don't fall. We will not fall." At first, the earthly government called it manipulation. They said it was a setup, that rebels were trying to deceive. But soon the military technicians confirmed it. The frequency was clean, unadulterated, and truly transmitted from the Martian soil. And there was something else, traces of external overlapping signals, the same strange signature that had already been detected in military channels. The Earth Council had no choice. They could not ignore it. They decided to send the Blue Fleet, 3 orbital cruisers, 5 escort frigates, and dozens of retrofitted military freighters. It was the official answer: crush the rebellion before it spreads, restore order, and investigate who else was blowing war from space. But on the way, doubt spread among the crew members themselves. Soldiers saw the same recordings as everyone else. They saw the unmarked drones firing at civilians and troops. They began to ask, are we going to save or to conquer? Aram, back in space on his patched-up freighter, was one of the first to cross paths with the Blue Fleet midway. The captain of the cruiser Atlas authorized its approach, curious about the pilot who was flying through the wreckage as if it were home. "Have you been to Mars?" the captain asked. Aram nodded. He showed images of the drones, strange circuits, and the recorded voice repeating the same words: "Divide. Kill yourselves." The silence from the bridge was heavy. "This is not ours," the captain murmured. But the Earth only believes by seeing. While the fleet advanced, on Mars, the situation became complicated. Cydonia rebels sent messages asking for support, not surrender. Earth troops already stationed on Elysium were given contradictory orders: attack or negotiate. Each unit did what it thought was right. Some retreated, others shot. The chaos fed itself. It was in this interval that the strange voice returned, now bolder. "Earthlings, hammer them. Martians, destroy them. Divide yourselves. Bleed." The whisper no longer hid the goal. The next night, when the Blue Fleet entered Martian orbit, it expected to find only rebels. Instead, it detected unknown craft. Small, fast, hidden in the shadow of the moons. They were not human colonies. They had no land subscription. They didn't smell like Mars. They were the origin of the interference. The sensors confirmed it. The voices inciting war did not come from Martians or Earthlings. They came from these ships. And suddenly doubt is no longer doubt. The Atlas commander looked at the screen full of red dots. The Blue Fleet was in the midst of a dilemma: fire on rebels or on a greater threat. On land, Mira and Raoul gathered people from both sides in the galleries of Cydonia, showing downed drones and alien circuits. The mistrust still existed, but the reality was clear. There was an enemy from the outside throwing the two into the abyss, and it was on that night that the Earth responded. Not with an official declaration, not with a treaty, but with a dry order that echoed from the Atlas Bridge to all ships. Priority target, unidentified contact. Rebels, if you don't shoot us, we won't shoot you. The Blue Fleet's first shot did not fall on Cydonia. It crashed on a pale ship hidden behind Phobos. The explosion streaked the red sky. The war had changed hands. The sky on Mars lit up like never before. The Blue Fleet's firing tore through Phobos's shadow and split one of the pale ships in two. For a few seconds, it looked like a star falling in slow motion until it shattered into metallic dust. Rebels and ground troops stopped to look. For the first time, they weren't shooting at each other. They were looking up. In the tunnels of Cydonia, Lila's tape recorder picked up the hiss again. But it wasn't the same as before. It was more urgent, more angry, like a cornered beast. They are together. It cannot be. Divide yourselves. Divide. Mira stood beside her and listened to every word. Raoul, too. The look they exchanged did not need translation. It was a confession. The enemy was not Mars versus Earth. It was something hidden in the dark, breathing hatred into two languages at the same time. Meanwhile, scientists from the Blue Fleet deciphered the fragments of the downed ship. There was no cockpit, and there was no flight deck. Just fluid circuits, structures that looked like bones and muscles at the same time. It was not a piloted craft. It was a metallic organism, not made to carry, but to infiltrate. Created to disguise itself in signs, to imitate voices, and to pretend to be human. One of the technicians looked at the captain of the Atlas and said in a low voice, "They don't want territory. They want us to destroy ourselves." The proof came soon after. Communication networks on both sides were invaded by fake broadcasts. For the rebels, messages appeared with the seal of the Earth. Execute all adult settlers. The rest will be reallocated. For the troops, messages appeared as if from Cydonia. Attack the oxygen plant. They are weakened. But now, after Lila's recorder, no one swallowed it easily. Each order was checked 2 or 3 times. The lie was beginning to lose strength. Still, the pale drones kept descending. They attacked in silence, hitting both sides without discrimination. Rebels and soldiers were forced to fight back to back, aiming at the same target. Mines that had previously served against ground troops were now used against alien machines. Energy shields that once blocked settlers now protected families. The improvised war began to create a new map of alliances. Mira led the settlers through the tunnels. Raoul guided the soldiers on the avenues. At a crossroads, they ended up meeting. Instinctively, the two pointed guns at each other. But behind Raoul, there were children he helped evacuate. Behind Mira, there were elderly people carrying oxygen cylinders. None of them were fired. "Truce?" asked Raoul. "As long as they are in heaven, truce," replied Mira. Lila held up the recorder and broadcast it on an open channel. "Mars calls Earth. They don't want just one planet. They want both. If you are human, fight against what you are not." The message went through. Soldiers in Elysium, rebels in Valles Marineris, and Blue Fleet pilots in orbit. Everyone heard the childish voice echoing over the radio, and everyone understood. The enemy was in the wind, blowing division. On the Atlas Bridge, the captain made the decision that would change everything. "Forget the cities for now. If we cut the throat of this wind, the fire goes out." Sensors began to sweep. They found something huge, hidden under the sandstorm of Utopia Planitia. A buried structure, pulsating signals like a beating heart. It was not a colony. It was not a human base. It was a nest. The aliens weren't just blowing in from the outside. They were inside Mars, under the ground. The revelation fell like thunder. Rebels and soldiers, once separated by ideology, now had the same target. But to get to it, they would need to cross deserts, storms, and above all, cross the still fresh hatred between them. It was on that night that the whisper lost its secret. The strange voices in the Martian wind have been unmasked, and what started as rebellion became something bigger, a war for the survival of the species. The map of the war changed from one moment to the next. Until then, Mars and Earth faced each other in narrow corridors, iron mines, and cracked domes. Now the target was another, a structure buried in Utopia Planitia, a heart beating signals that fed the voices of the wind. Mira looked at Raoul under the red emergency light. Neither of them wanted to trust. The hatred still burned, but above them, in the dark sky, the pale ships kept falling on civilians without choosing sides. "If we don't go together, no one will get out of here alive," she said firmly, but without the taste of speech. "But I trust their death more than yours." It was enough. The next morning, columns of rebels and ground squads marched side by side through the cold deserts of Mars. There were no flags. There was dust, improvised weapons, and suspicious silence. The wind took the two colors, the red of Martian clothes and the worn blue of earthly uniforms, and mixed them into a single powder. On the way, the pale drones attacked in swarms. Rebels used mining explosives to open craters. Earth soldiers set up energy shields. Together, they created fire corridors, pulling the machines into traps. There was no rehearsal. There was a need. Each attack was repelled, not for confidence, but for survival. In the middle of the march, Lila transmitted in open frequency. Mars and Earth walk together. To repeat, we walk together. If you're human, listen. The enemy is under the ground. His voice echoed in shelters, in ships' cabins, and in underground cables. Even those who were still suspicious understood. The war had changed its form. When they arrived at Utopia Planitia, they saw the truth. The ground pulsed in green waves, like the breath of a giant beast. Black towers emerged from nowhere, growing like bare bones. The nest was not a base, it was an organism, alive. Raoul gave the order in a dry voice. It doesn't matter who shoots first, it is important that everyone shoots at the same target. Mira repeated on the rebel channel. If you shoot a human, you die. If you shoot at that, you live. The attack began. Mining explosives dug holes in the body. Earth frigates in orbit fired concentrated beams, opening craters of plasma. Rebels raced through newly opened tunnels, carrying makeshift charges. Ground troops fought their way with shields and launchers. Each side covered the other without asking permission. But the nest reacted. From within the craters, metallic creatures, hybrids of machine and flesh, emerged like iron ants. They advanced in hordes with long limbs, sharp claws, and distorted voices that repeated the whispers of the wind. Divide, divide. No one obeyed. Rebels and soldiers formed lines together, firing until the barrels of the guns were incandescent. Human drones captured images and transmitted them throughout the galaxy, proof that the war was not civil, but species versus species. Aram, in his freighter, descended into the chaos, bringing supplies. He threw boxes of ammunition and oxygen cylinders over the fields. He landed among rebels and troops and shouted to anyone who would listen. It doesn't matter where you came from. It matters who is trying to erase us all. That night, the Martian dust did not separate, united. The red of the planet and the blue of the Earth were confused under the same storm. The forced alliance was not signed on paper. It was written in sweat, blood, and gunpowder, not by choice, out of necessity. And it was enough for the next step, the battle that would be recorded as the night Mars called Earth. Night fell on Utopia Planitia, and brought with it the greatest battle Mars has ever known. The sky was covered with red dust illuminated by green explosions. The alien nest roared beneath the ground, each pulsation sending out shock waves that made the domes shake miles away. It was as if the planet itself was sick, trying to expel the invader from within. Rebels and Earth troops fanned out in makeshift lines around the crater. There was no single commander. Mira shouted orders to the settlers. Raoul shouted to the soldiers, and every human voice overcame the chaos. But they all shouted in the same direction, against the enemy who did not speak with his mouth but with the wind. From the ground, the hybrid creatures emerged in hordes. Metal claws, eyes of white light, long limbs that beat like blades. They advanced, repeating the same phrase, distorted, divide, kill yourselves, divide. But now, no one obeyed. The rebels dug fast trenches, using mining explosives to open lines of fire. Ground soldiers stretched energy shields over the flanks, protecting entire families who were still running for shelters. As the hordes approached, they all fired together. The sound echoed like human thunder, covering the whisper of the machines. In the sky, the blue fleet dueled against the pale ships. Each shot illuminated the fine atmosphere. Earth's frigates advanced in formation, but enemy ships moved like serpents, bending at impossible angles. Many cruisers capsized, falling in flames over the desert. But each fall was answered with a terrestrial and Martian advance in unison. Lila, on top of a container, transmitted non-stop. His childlike voice crossed civilian and military radios, echoing even in orbit. "This is Mars. This is Earth. We are together. To repeat, together. If you are human, fight for the human by your side." The recording became an improvised anthem. Soldiers shouted "together" before reloading. Rebels stamped their feet on the ground, repeating the beat. The wind, once dominated by the enemy voice, now carried human words. Aram dove with the freighter in the middle of the battle. He threw supplies, cylinders, and ammunition where the lines almost broke. Then he took off again, distracting enemy drones, cutting through the sky as an easy target, just to make room for others to breathe. At the White Well, in silence, Aisha and the old Guardian watched on the old screens. The lunar jaw pulsed, ready to bite again. But Aisha decided not to trigger it. This time, the victory had to come from Earth and Mars together. The moon's tooth would be saved for the day when there was no way out. The climax came when the pale ships opened their mouths of light over the crater. Green beams descended, melting sand, cutting entire rows. For an instant, it seemed like the end. Mira fell to her knees, covering Leela. Raoul stepped forward with his cracked shield. Many screamed, and then, from within the red earth itself, came the answer. The mining colonies, scattered for decades, opened all the valves at the same time. Underground explosions tore through the ground, engulfing creatures and cracking the structure of the nest. Rebels knew the tunnels better than anyone. They had been setting traps for weeks. The heart of the enemy was struck from within. In the sky, the Blue Fleet concentrated all of its power in a joint shot. Frigates, cruisers, even improvisedly armed freighters. A blue beam pierced through the atmosphere and hit the invaders' central ship. The impact was so strong that all the dust from Mars rose up, covering stars. When it went down, only burning debris remained. The silence that followed was heavy, almost sacred. No one knew if the victory was real or just halftime. But then, from radio to radio, from tunnel to tunnel, the same phrase echoed. The night Mars called Earth, we are alive. People cried. Soldiers embraced rebels. Children ran between boots and rifles. The entire planet breathed together for the first time in centuries. The aliens weren't done. Maybe they would come back. Perhaps they were already in other places. But that night would be recorded not by the defeated enemy, but by the impossible that happened. Earth and Mars, so divided, had fought as one, and the whole universe in silence noticed. The dust took days to settle. The sky on Mars was still streaked with burning debris, and the ground remained warm, as if silently guarding the rage that had exploded there. The nest was dead, but the entire planet was still breathing, as if it were in wakefulness. Cydonia, once divided into streets of settlers and troop corridors, was now a mixture. Earth shields covered shelters of Martian families. Mining tools were used to repair frigates. Doctors from the garrisons worked side by side with improvised healers from the tunnels. It was not full peace. Looks of distrust still existed. But the eyes that once saw only enemies now saw survivors. On Earth, the news changed its tone. Images broadcast from the battlefield showed soldiers with blue badges and settlers covered in red powder fighting together against creatures no one could name. The lie had been broken. It was no longer possible to sell the war as blind rebellion. The whole of humanity had seen it. The enemy was not the other human. The Earth Council met in emergency. They did not know whether to call it a truce or a treaty. The leaders of Mars, still suspicious, refused titles. One of them said in front of everyone, "We don't need paper. We need respect." It was in this climate that the phrase that became a symbol emerged. A reporter asked Mira if she still considered herself just Martian. She replied, in a voice hoarse with dust and battle, "I am human, Marciana, Earthling, whatever. I still breathe. That's what matters." Raoul, next to her, added, "Two worlds. A name." The sentence ran. It was repeated on clandestine radios, in impromptu speeches, and in children's songs. It did not erase the pain. It did not heal the wounds, but it was the seed of something new. Aram returned to space, his freighter more patched than ever. It carried supplies from Earth to Mars and minerals from Mars to Earth. He passed in silence between worlds, always remembering what he had seen in Pocho Branco. He knew that the danger was not over. That enemy, whoever it was, would not give up so easily. But he also knew that after that night it would be harder to fool humanity with the same trick. Lila kept the tape recorder as a treasure. His name ran among colonies and cities as a symbol of the message that woke up Earth and Mars at the same time. As a child, she had already done what many leaders could not: unite with one voice. And so, the war left more than ruins. He left a memory. The night Mars called to Earth was not remembered as a military victory, but as a night of revelation. The night when a species, on the verge of splitting, discovered that it could be whole again. Two worlds. A name. Human.